It's a real pleasure to be here today. As many of you will know, we had a question time debate on Friday night with lots of well-known people. Carrie Simmons came and spoke as the Prime Minister's partner, environment activist. We had Chris Packham there, Deborah Meaden from Dragon's Den, Tony Juniper, the chair of Natural England, Philip Limbury from Compassion in World Farming. We had a really interesting collection of people with lots of expertise and knowledge and profile. But I thought when we put the whole programme together for Birdfair this year, it was equally important that we had a question time event for young people, because often what you find is that young people might sit in an audience like that and ask an adult audience a question, or adults might predict what they think young people think. And we hear a lot from older people at the moment about what young people think, and not always right in what they're saying. So it's very, very important that today we have an opportunity for young people who are involved at all stages of life at the present time, in writing, in campaigning, in promoting awareness of the natural world and the need to protect it, to share their views with you. And we've got a really good panel of speakers today, all of whom in their own way I think are making a huge difference, not just in this country but increasingly around the world as well. So we start on our left hand side. I'm going to just allow Bella Lack to introduce herself.
So as Dominic said, I'm Bella Lack, and what I do mainly is I use the means I have to raise awareness of the ecological and climate crisis. So I use social media, and I make short films on YouTube, and I blog as well. But increasingly I think it's important that young people start to take action rather than simply campaigning, because I think it's a bit disempowering to believe that's the only place our power lies. So I'm working with other young people on the first youth-funded nature reserve in Ecuador, which is so exciting because it's never been done, and I think that's going to be evidence to politicians and to businesses and corporations that if young people can purchase land and protect vital ecological areas, then they should be doing that too. So that's the main project I'll be working on in the upcoming few months.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Rebecca Bailey. Rebecca is an amazing campaigner at a very young age for beautiful butterflies. These are just some of the campaign booklets and pamphlets that I know she produces. She has a wonderful website. Her mum Nicola is here as well. There's huge support, I know, in everything you do. So Rebecca, do you want to talk a little bit about why you love butterflies so much and what to do?
Because when I was 3 years old, my mum was cooking dinner and we found a caterpillar in some broccoli, and I was munching away at it, and my mum gave it to me and I was playing with it. And that's why I love butterflies and caterpillars so much, and I look after them in my butterfly farm in my back garden, and that's it really.
That's brilliant.
You inspire lots of other people to love them as well, and that's why you're here today. So let's have a huge round of applause. Our next speaker is someone I've worked with and seen grow up, really, an amazing wildlife campaigner, and now an author as well. So let's just welcome Alex White. Thank you. Please, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex White. I'm a 16-year-old wildlife photographer, blogger, naturalist, and recently just became an author. So I do a lot of work with Dominic, Chris Packham, and a load of other famous people. But my main aim is to try and get the special age between moving from primary school years, where all the children in primary school seem to be really interested in wildlife, to moving up into that secondary school years where they seem to lose that interest. So my aim is to try and keep that main interest. Thank you. Yeah, so keep the interest throughout the secondary school years, and then hopefully through on through college and or A levels, and then go on from there. So yeah, that's me.
And you've got a great book out, Get Your Boots On, which I think is actually very good for this particular event, because you definitely need welly boots here. But it's a great read. Lots of people have contributed small forwards and supporting stuff in there, including me. It's a real privilege and honour to do it. So if you haven't had a chance to, you can get the book still here, can you?
Yeah.
Where can you? Wild Sun. Get yourself a copy. Brilliant. It's beautifully illustrated and it's wonderful. So well done. So a round of applause, please. Our next speaker is Finlay Pringle. He's someone after my own heart, really, because he says, you think I'm a bit radical at times. Look at these pink shorts I've got, what can I say? I think Finlay has come to lots of people's attention because not only is he young and not only is he really, really interested in sharks and wildlife and conservation, he's actually quite willing to be a bit controversial as well and actually say when he feels somebody's not doing something right, maybe when an organisation isn't treating him right, and I think on that basis he's got a huge amount of respect. So I'm just going to hand over to Finlay as well. Finlay.
Well, I'm 11 years old, I'm from Liverpool in the north of Scotland, and if you could tell, I absolutely love sharks. And yeah, as Dominic says, I've always wanted to be almost stick out like a sore thumb. I've always wanted to be controversial. I've always wanted to prove people wrong. I don't know why, I just do. So my main campaign, I just went up and told Bear Grylls that I didn't like what he was doing to do with Shark Tank, and it's just sort of exploded from there. Thank you, Emily, for running the petition, which got us all started.
Thank you so much. A round of applause, please. And last but not least is probably the one person that I've got to know probably well over 5 years, because you've been probably involved in this debate longer than most. You were one of the first that I came across as young people on Spring Watch and other programmes talking about wildlife and nature. Have been obviously very much engaged in events like Birdfair, speaking and blogging. Georgia Locock, you're now at university, so you're the oldest I think on our panel, but you give a broader experience having gone through that youth to young adult stage. So I'm just listening to you here.
Yeah. Lovely. No, as Dominic said, my name's Georgia Locock. Sort of as everyone else, I sort of started with my passion for wildlife as a young age, and it's sort of I remember first looking on Twitter and writing my blog, sort of feels like quite a few years ago now, trying to find other young people my age that were interested in the same that I was interested in. And I can definitely say, like, in the last few years at that point, there's like a handful, and then coming to Birdfair and then you met them, but now it just seems to have like just blown out of control. So it's really lovely, amazing to see. So to have the panel running again. I say I'm studying zoology at university at the moment. I've just finished my first year, and I do a lot of I get involved with lots of sort of campaigns through social media, through my blog, and again, I'm really passionate about education and going into schools. And one of my recent and upcoming campaigns is focusing on, it's been mainly in Cyprus and the Middle East, but persecution, mass illegal persecution of migratory birds. I've worked with this in Cyprus with the Committee Against Bird Slaughter, and then now sort of a bit wider with the Ornithological Society in the Middle East, so sort of really focusing on that. One of the most recent campaigns, which I'm sure I'll talk about throughout.
I'm going to start off the questions for bringing in the audience. I wanted to ask one question in particular to begin with. On Friday night, I said when I started the panel, there was one person that couldn't join us who had been in contact earlier in the year that was interested in being on the panel, but was actually crossing the Atlantic on a solar-based yacht, as we were aware, namely this Greta Thunberg, who's become a really well-known global campaigner in a very short period of time. I wanted just to put to the panel the point that Greta is just one of a number of people, and we have them behind this table today, that are giving voice to a new generation, and we call this panel Inherit the Earth, but these are the people that are going to have to pick up the world and to live in the world over the next 50, 60 years with all the problems that adults have largely created for them. But the point I wanted to ask the panel was, with Greta, with the panellists here who are doing all their work, with the climate strikes that we're seeing with school children getting involved around the world, with the fact that media are beginning to speak more to young people, are young people really beginning to influence the debate now? Do you feel that you're beginning to change the way that adults and the decision makers in the world are beginning to think about these problems? And will it make a fundamental difference, do we think, about really beginning to address them? I'll start with Bella, let's start with you.
Thank you. I think recently there's been a lot of opposition to the message that lots of young people are saying, and I think that's primarily because Greta and the rest of the youth movement are challenging the pre-existing systems which provide comfort for lots of people, so they feel quite uncomfortable that that's happening. And I think that opposition and resistance, rather than being evidence of failure, I think it's evidence of victory, because it's showing that if people are uncomfortable, then something's changing and the systems are changing. So I think that's hope, and really I can't measure the success that we've had yet, because when we're older, in about 50 years, that's when we'll look back and think I can't believe that how much emissions we were emitting, and I can't believe how much forest was being deforested back then. So we can only really measure success when we look back, but from the resistance we're seeing at the moment, I think definitely there's a lot of progression.
Can I ask you, because you're in quite a unique position, a bit like Greta in some ways, you're going into media studios, Channel 4, Sky News, doing the sort of interviews I do. How do you feel that you're treated? Are the journalists who are interviewing you because they think you're just unique because you're a young person, or are they treating you in the sense that your opinions matter as much as any other adult they might be interviewing? How do you feel about that?
I think sometimes it's a bit tokenistic, almost having a young person, and people like to hear the message and they often applaud and say it's inspirational, but then 5 minutes later it's all forgotten. But young people have the biggest stake in the future, and it's also the largest demographic in the world, so I think it's really important that we're all engaged in the debate, and on panels like this, and in businesses and organisations that our voices are listened to and acted upon as well.
Can I come to you, the one troublemaker? You've came to my attention because when we had the Walk for Wildlife, and Chris brought you up on stage and he talked about the issues you'd had with the Sharks Trust and some of the problems with Bear Grylls and the campaign that you got involved with. And what struck me was that you were quite happy just to talk about the fact that you were very, very right in what you were doing and you weren't happy necessarily the way you'd been treated. We don't often hear that from such a young person, but can you just tell me, you do say what you think and how important that is to you. It doesn't matter how old you are, you will say if you think someone is wrong, isn't that right?
Well, yeah, I have always thought that what's the point in lying? Let's just tell them exactly what I think of them, and that's what I do. If someone's doing well, I'll say that, but if someone's messing up, I'll give them hell. So yeah, that sort of answers it. I've always wanted to give them exactly the truth, really, of how I feel.
Finlay, can Finlay just tell us how he felt when he got sacked, though?
Yeah,
And tell him, because nobody knows here.
Just say to you, you'd upset Bear Grylls, and on that basis they thought they were going to say, we won't abuse you anymore as a young ambassador. Is that right?
Well, that happened quite a long time ago.
Yes.
But I remember at the time I was pretty upset about it because I don't know how long I was part of that, maybe a year, and I'd done other campaigns and started a Facebook message exactly the same way as Scotland's young shark ambassador, I believe. And then just because I had to go at a celebrity, apparently they have to sack me.
Not very good thing to do. Well done for speaking up. I think that's really important. Let's have a round of applause. Come to you, Alex, because I've written a book, and I know how hard it is to write a book, and I know how hard it is to sort of go on the road and publish, get it marketed effectively, signing it and sitting there and thinking, is anyone going to come and actually buy it? You must have felt that yesterday. Yeah. But they did come. They came in large numbers because it's a great book. How are people treating you? Do you feel they're treating you differently now that you've written a book? Are they treating you more as an adult, as an author? Because it's quite a big thing to do what you've done. I just wondered how you feel so far about being an author, and well done for being an author.
Thank you. I think when writing a book, when I first started writing a book, I didn't think it was going to happen. I wrote a couple of pages, and then I didn't really think that was going to go anywhere. And then, it did go somewhere, didn't it? And then, you just keep writing pages. But as soon as it got published, nothing really changed. I mean, I was still being given the amount of respect I had before. I mean, I don't really, care the fact that if people, the amount of respect I get, I don't really mind, because as long as I get the message that I wrote the book for, as across to younger teenagers and stuff, then I'm happy. So especially if what I'm trying to say is nothing has changed in the way of what people see me. I'm still a 16-year-old boy who wrote a book about wildlife, and I don't really mind the fact that people say, oh, you're so good, and I'm like, yeah, thank you, but I didn't write the book for fame or money. It's for the deliberate purpose to get children involved in nature.
Yes, well, congratulations. Just a round of applause. Rebecca, these are beautiful and well done. And obviously this is your heart and soul going into this. You're very young, but how do you feel when people sort of look at this and smile? And this is beautiful, by the way, if anyone's not. So can we get copies of Nicola? These are available here.
Yeah, I'll leave for it if you're
Brilliant.
at the papers.
But this is just, to me, it's the colours, it just captures your imagination straight away. So just tell us a little bit about that and how that came about. Did you choose the colours and the illustrations? Did you get...
In Pat the Caterpillar,
Yes.
the book,
This one.
I made up this bats and cat bit.
Wow.
Beautiful. So this was your idea, and did you choose the colours and do you have some? Yes.
I drew the bats and cats
Yes.
and on a bit of paper,
Yes.
and my mum just copied it out and put it in the book.
And you help me with the fun facts at the back, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this wonderful picture here of your little pink house. So is this in the garden?
It is, yeah.
Oh.
In the back garden.
In the back garden. That's fantastic, isn't it? Can we see? Can we see this? It's beautiful. Oops. Well done. And are you really happy with all of this and how people react to it? Do you have friends at school that see this and how do they see it? Do they like it?
They haven't seen it yet.
They haven't seen it
No,
yet?
it's quite new, yeah.
This is all new,
Yeah.
so you'll get that reaction soon then.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah.
You are indeed. Well done. Because isn't this just beautiful? Just the imagination that's gone into this. And if you look at everything that's on, your social media and all that you're putting out, it's wonderful. Let's have a round of applause for that. Can I come on to you, Josh? Because you've got experience of, broadcasting, campaigning. You're now at university. How is life treating you now as a young campaigner, now university student? How do you feel? Are you talking more in university about these things? What's happening on campus with some of the things that you're really passionate about?
It's a very different sort of perspective, I suppose, going from high school and sixth form into university. Obviously, I know from being at school it was very different. Like, there wasn't as many people around me that were as passionate, and obviously going into university, it's sort of a very different situation. And you can definitely see it's nice. I suppose it's a lot more comfortable being surrounded by those who are sort of passionate about the same thing that you're passionate about, and getting campaigns onto campus. Like we've had up in Hull, so like with there's a lot of marine, focused on a lot on the marine wildlife and the marine courses, and talking a lot about like plastic pollution and sort of campaigns like that. So it's a very different situation. It's a very sort of different scenario, and it's also nice to see these young people, like, they've come to university. And one of my courses this year was called Science Communication, and we did a lot of work looking at social media and like the importance of that, which was a new module for, actually I think it was last year, but this year, due to it, people on the course were sort of realising the importance of putting themselves out there on Twitter and on social media, and their value of their voice, and just realising that where they can get by sort of putting their voice out there, putting their message out there and writing about it. So it's sort of, it's been very interesting and sort of been really nice, different situation at university,
But you're enjoying it?
Yeah, definitely.
And have you started to think about what your future career might be? Are you still interested in maybe going into some sort of conservation, wildlife research type area? Are you thinking about that now? Has things changed as you've got older? Are you still thinking along the same lines?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's sort of deciding which branch you want to go into. You want to make the biggest impact that you can. So I'm really interested and passionate about education and communication. So I'm thinking, is that the way to go, or is it sort of research and science and being that backbone to what you've got in communication? So it's difficult to decide where you want to go, and there's so much you want to stretch yourself across because you want to make an impact, you want to make something change. So, but it's sort of a difficult question. At the moment, I'm just letting it just sort of go with it and see how that happens. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. A round of applause. Opportunity to raise a question from the audience. Does anyone have a question they want to put to our young panellists here about any issue around nature protection and wildlife? There's one here. Do you want to just stand up so they can hear you? Is that okay?
Yes. So I've been involved in wildlife conservation and talking about it for quite a lot of years, and for most of those years, in fact most of my life since I was a teenager, there's been this hand-wringing about how we can get young people engaged and how we're going to get them interested. And the last year or so, since I've met some of you and heard voices, your voices being raised, and seeing climate strikers and young people getting involved in extinction rebellion, part of me is thinking, maybe we don't need to worry about the young people anymore. And I think actually that's right, we don't need to worry about the young people, it's our generation, your parents' generation. So you're speaking for your generation and for your future. How can we help? How can we help you? If we're not focusing so much on our anxiety about young people being engaged, how can we help you reach the older generation, the ones that are causing the problems?
Good question. Do you want to start with that one?
Thank you. Well, I think the whole point of the youth movement is to engage the older generation. And you answered your original question, which is that young people are already engaged and now it needs to trickle upwards in most cases. And I think what adults can do is, first of all, listen, which is increasingly happening, and then act. And it depends what the demands are. But for the climate strikes, there are demands which one of them was for the government to declare a climate and ecological crisis, which they did. And obviously that's not enough. Now there needs to be action. But the government has to act, but there's also a personal level where people have to take responsibility for each of their individual actions. And I think adults can begin by, rather than looking outwards, turning the magnifying glass on their own lives and seeing how they can make changes, and then helping their children and young people in their lives make those changes as well. Because if you're young, sometimes it's difficult to implement those changes in your own lives.
You're going to speak, for example, at the Laundry event that's coming up in September. You've been speaking at government events, the Foreign Office Wildlife Crime Conference, I think last year you spoke at. So you're going into the media and speaking to millions of people. So you've become a powerful voice in your own right. But you know, at the beginning we were just talking about influencing. Are you influencing, you think, both young and old people equally from what you're saying? Is it the case that maybe more young people look at Bella and think, oh, that's really interesting, I should be thinking about that? Or are you making people like us, older people in this room, maybe think we've just not done enough? How do you think you're influencing this?
I don't think in this room, but at the conference you were referencing, which was the Illegal Wildlife Trade Conference, so there were lots of heads of state and prime ministers, and they all went into a room and made pledges. And now it's been about 6 or 7 months and none of the pledges have been implemented. And Michael Gove promised lots of meetings as well for the Ivory Alliance, and those weren't followed through. And it's not him, but it's just in general that our system and the government doesn't follow through on the pledges that have been made. And that's one of the most important things now, to actually make those pledges and then act upon them, because that's, from my life, from the time that I've been involved, I haven't seen any real bold action being taken.
Do you think, just to finish that point, do you think where you are at the moment that too much of this is divided along political lines? We should put political differences aside and say that we've got to do this for the environment and wildlife. It shouldn't be about one party or another. Is that part of the problem, you think?
Yeah, because it's a human issue, it's not a political issue at all. And having the borders and divisions and the silo culture, even in conservation, it doesn't help at all. So I think we need to remove all of that and just see it as a human issue. It's going to affect all of us, and we all need to do something about it.
Yeah, thank you. Alice, can I just come on to you? You've taken pictures, you've got blogs, you've got friends at school, of course, that you talk to about this. You're now reaching a broader audience with your book. How do you think you're influencing people? You know, your friends at your age, and also the older people you're coming across.
Okay, so with my friends down in Oxford, I was actually quite surprised. So for the first climate strike, I told the school I was going to go, and they said no. So I came back home and told my mum, and she was like, so I'm going to write a polite email to the school and say that I'm not going to go in. And they came back with it saying it's going to be an unauthorised absence, and then my mum said, okay, then we'll just take it out for a full day. And that worked, so I went there. And then the next day the school came along and said, you shouldn't have done that, we may give you a consequence. So that was the first one. Next one, they said, we're going to lock all the doors. That they shouldn't say
So
that.
you locked the door so you couldn't get out?
Yes, I could get out. So me being me, I came home, told my mum, I was like, how about I put this on Twitter? I should have really explained it on Twitter how they were going to lock the doors. So they always lock the doors in case there's security. But it went a bit wild, and it was saying that always keeping privacy and stuff is in the face of human rights and stuff. And when I went down to the climate strike, I was actually surprised to see how many people had jumped the fence from our school. Even though I've been told there was like hundreds of teachers just against the fence, there were still children just jumping over the fence. I was just like, although I was very surprised because my school is just not a great school, so I'm not saying anything, but I was quite surprised that there were so many of all ages. It was like from my year, which was year 11, to year 7 jumping the fence. I was like, this is incredible. I mean, I only thought that there'd be like 4 or 5 people from my school. It was really good. And then when I saw photos of people still in class, I saw 2 of my friends still in class, and the whole classroom just went up. There was only about 5 people per class. So it's really good to know that there were so many people going out and risking getting detentions and being consequences, and risking their whole school and risking time after school to protest. And it's amazing to know that that children do actually care.
So you think that the climate strikes, and you've been involved in this too, but I think George probably...
And Finlay.
You think this is not just children wanting to be involved in something that's gaining their attention because they're on the streets, that there's a genuine interest in the issue? Is there a combination of the two? Are people saying, I've got to be involved because everyone's there, or are they saying, actually, I really feel I need to do something?
Well, some of the people that were there, they were genuinely holding posters, being involved, although I do know a couple of people who went out.
Just thought we'd get out for a few hours.
And after a while, after a couple of times, they just started letting children out. And I do know a few people who were in my year who just went out to go to KFC or whatever. But there were genuinely a lot of children who went out with posters and decided to go just for a couple of hours and then go back into school. But the problem with our school is that if you go out, it's a C3, which is a detention. And then when you come back in, it's either you're allowed in or it's a C3, which is another detention. So it's great to see that there were people out there. It's also annoying to see that people just taking advantage of the opportunity to get out of school and get out of lessons.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question regarding the schools?
Yes.
Because it's not until recently that my daughter has got the conservation, animals and things like that is in her heart. So her education is in her head. But at school, her school is not mixed, and her college, sorry. So it wasn't until we actually went to an exhibition for What You Need that we knew children can have jobs like this. I've always assumed it was somebody like Chris Packer who was on the television and then came to do this. I didn't realise it was an education that she could do at uni. And so we went to this thing at the NEC, and then she was like, I could see her, she was like, it's something jobs that she could have done, but it wasn't here. It wasn't something she wanted to follow and pursue. And then she thought, I think zoology, and that's it. And she's just gone like this. But none of that is from school. I don't think there's any help in education, in schooling, about conservation and heading from Leicestershire schools anyway. So I think it ought to be brought back to schools for them to support you, and you not have to fight to get out of the classroom. The teachers should be there to take you to these things.
So regarding the question, I get it that there are a lot of schools who don't really support wildlife and nature. In fact, the only times that you do get to even read about wildlife and nature is in biology, isn't it? There's no GCSE regarding the natural history, although there are plans to. There's a petition and there's plans to try and get a natural history, which would make wildlife seen more mainstream than it just being a side thing, which is geeky and nerdy.
I mean, had my brother, because she was different.
She didn't follow fashion and makeup.
That was her thing. Her thing is like animals, earth, and that. But she was like different. So she didn't follow that crowd. She followed the animal crowd. But I think there's that problem that's got to be sorted out. So that kind of different things.
ask Rebecca, because you're at a very young age, are your friends at school, your primary school at the moment, presumably, is it? Yeah. So what sort of age group is Rebecca in? Year 1, 2, how's that?
From reception up to 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are your friends, are they interested in what you're doing? Do you talk to them about all of what you're doing with your caterpillars and butterflies?
Well, I tell a few of my friends, like my best friend Grace, and my own friends.
Yes. And are they interested? Do they like what you're doing?
Yeah.
They do. And do you think you'll win more of them over, get more of them? Is it mostly girls or are the boys interested too? It's a mixed school, presumably.
Yeah.
Do many boys take an interest? Not
I
yet.
think it's mainly girls.
Mainly girls.
Yeah.
So there's a bit more work to do on the boys. But have you done any? Have you spoken in a classroom? Do you have a nature course?
Assemblies, she's been in. Yeah.
I've been in front of the whole school in assemblies before,
Amazing.
and I've shown them that I've been in the Butterfly Conservation magazine, and I've shown them the butterfly count sheet if they want to take part.
So you've spoken to all of the children in the assembly about what you've done?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's amazing. Well, that's all right.
Yeah, brilliant. Well
What about you? Did you talk to your school? Did you talk to them about what's going on at the Shark Trust? Are you a bit of a hero now because you've fallen out with Bear Grylls?
Well, really, I mean, I talk to my school a lot.
Yeah.
Most people just roll their eyes and don't really care. So I keep trying them. And in regards to that, I mean, what happened with the Bear Grylls campaign, it went fine. But now, all I'm known is the boy who told Bear Grylls you suck. That is all I'm known as now. I would like to be known as something a bit more positive, but being the media, they didn't read the actual real letter I sent to him. They just read the you suck bit at the end.
Would you like to meet him? If you got a chance to meet him and talk to him about your success, would you
No.
like to do that? No.
Because I mean, maybe, I tried many times. I
If we put
tried.
this on YouTube and we go back to him and say, listen, you should come with me, and maybe you should come to, should we bring him to Birdfair next year?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we'll all have certain things to say.
Should we invite him on the Friday night panel? Why not? He'd be good on the panel. He'll be provocative, but we'll see. We'll see what we can do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So that's what happened.
Good. Good. Thank you very much, Georgia. University. What's going on? What about climate strike? Have you been involved in it? Anything at campus? Is it just passing people by?
There hasn't been much on campus. There's been a bit sort of obviously in like Hull and York and sort of obviously other places across the UK, which has been a little bit disappointing. But there's been there's been things going on. There's obviously like people getting involved through social media and online, which has really sort of brought a lot of people together and a lot of people sort of giving them, I think for a lot of young people, just giving them that buzz, to giving them an opportunity, sort of similar to what Alex was saying, like the positive side, giving an opportunity to show them that they can go and speak out and they can use their voice, and just show them the importance of how they can use their voice. But I think it's definitely something that's, as I say, it's growing and growing. It'd be really good to sort of see more on perhaps at universities. I think a lot of people have viewed it as the school strikes, and universities and students have seen it as, but definitely something hopefully in the future, and something that will definitely be growing and growing.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. Good. Keep it up. I think there's more work to be done, but there's definitely, and when I go to universities, there's a lot of energy there. You want a question from?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, ask Finlay how your climate strikes are going in Scotland. Do you think they are the same popularity as here in England?
Well, at the Birdfair on Friday was my 35th climate strike. We believe I was the first person at a climate strike in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
In regards to is it the samely covered and that sort of thing, well, I'm going to say no, because we're all the way up there, which means most people can't really be bothered to drive up and talk to me. So that's why you get more coverage in London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, York, other cities.
But I saw you on the news, but you were on BBC News though.
Yeah, I do get the odd visit, but that's very unusual to get a visit. But yeah.
Can I ask you, Bella, because you're fortunate, you're living, I think, is it Richmond or the South East you live at the moment? So you're close to London, you're part of, you've got connections with MPs and things, and I know you've worked really hard to sort of that. Do you sometimes think there's an advantage being close to London, knowing Westminster MPs, and if you're up in Scotland and you're isolated more, how do you feel about that? Is there
There's definitely an advantage having the access. I think the biggest advantage is having social media, because that's where you can, especially Twitter, that's where you can directly target politicians. Not target, you can access politicians. And unfortunately the new Environment Secretary doesn't have Twitter, so I don't know how it's going to be. No, but there's definitely a benefit living in London, close to where big stuff goes on.
It's a good point. We get that up with adult issues as well, London. We are too London-centric. So we've got, can I take that? There's one here and I'll come to you in a minute. Do you want to stand up and just ask your mind? Thank you.
Hi. I was just wondering, we at the Wildlife Trust, especially around here, we have a lot of younger people doing wildlife watch activities, and like you say, at the end of primary school it just seems to stop. And it's not cool to like wildlife. So do you think that's changing? Do you think people in your schools are actually becoming more aware of conservation and climate change? And do you think that is actually on the move now? And do you think that will improve and get better with time, with all your actions and all the other actions that are going on? Or will it, do you think it'll always be a constant battle in secondary schools to get people involved because the curriculum doesn't allow that? I've tried in the past, I used to run Nottinghamshire's environmental education centres, and secondary schools never came because they said it didn't fit into their timetable.
Yes, so a lot of this comes back to the whole issue of the national curriculum, the fact that we don't have a GCSE in natural history. I know there's been a lot of work done by various people to try and move that debate forward. Can I ask you, Georgia, because you've just come through secondary school into university, did you see when you were younger there was more going on in your early stages of school, and as you got towards the latter end it was more difficult to see what was happening, and then into university? Where do you see that sort of debate?
Yeah, I agree. So I think as much as there is definitely change happening, and it seems to have happened all of a sudden. I think to say I didn't really see it much in primary school. It was more, there was little bits going on in primary school. It was more and then into secondary school, to say just like the biology and talking about the hope to get more onto the curriculum. And again, like others spoke about in the panel, you stand out, and then that's how I found my sort of refuge in going on social media and finding like-minded others on Twitter and so on. But I think with a lot in the media at the moment on conservation and the climate rights and climate change, and whether it's sort of like documentaries, and whether it's more talking about the issues rather than just talking about the issues as well as like what's showing, like presenting wildlife. It's definitely making people are watching it, and young people are watching it, and young people are becoming more aware to it. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they weren't before, but they're seeing more of where they can stand up and where they can put their voice across, and they are definitely sort of getting more involved and waking up and wanting to get involved as well. So I think, things are changing. I definitely think so.
I'll take this other question, so this will come back up. You gentlemen here.
Yeah, but the question more to Bell, it's kind of like a thinking thing about, you say these people did not react in 6 months. I think one of the problems is that 6 months for an older person is an awfully short space of time. 3 months, 6 months for a person of your age is a long space of time. How do you think you can get to the older people who actually listen to you and not just make promises and say, yeah, we'll come along, yeah, we'll do something about this, oh yes, I've got this and I'll do it in 6 months, and 6 months gone by, it goes by too fast. When you're older, it's true. I didn't agree when I was your age. How do you think you could actually get across those people and say there's urgency, there's immediacy in this? How do you think you can actually get them to listen? I think there's something to happen. How do you feel about that? Actually get people to get the idea of really it's now, not tomorrow.
No, it's a good point you raise, because when the older we get, time tends to go more quickly. When I was younger, everything seemed to drag on. But you mentioned the fact you're disappointed already because you've had politicians tell you things are going to happen and not. But
yeah, I think 6 months may be a short time for an older person, but because the climate crisis and the ecological crisis are escalating so quickly, we can't really go by old people standards and and I think it's important that something along the lines of a youth committee is created so young people can hold adults accountable and as we are, but continue to say that this is our future and it's so important now that you begin to act really quickly and rather than in the past it's been quite a myopic sense of perspective where they look at the next election or the next election is usually the focus of politicians. So now we need to look not at the next election but at the next century and what's going to be happening and the changes, the planetary changes that are going to happen. So I think the perspective needs to widen but the time that we take to act needs to shorten.
You know, are you saying that you would like to see some sort of citizens' jury of young people to influence discussion and debate on key issues in the environment? You know, to empower them to say to politicians or local authorities or whoever it might be, business leaders, that before you decide on something, you should consult us and we will give you our considered opinion on what that might do to the world that we're growing up in. Is that the sort of thing that you think we need to be hearing?
Yeah, I think this isn't just in the conservation sphere, but in general, in our whole society, I think our attitude to younger people needs to change. Rather than, I think the younger generation are underestimated quite a lot as snowflakes, which I don't see anything wrong with being a snowflake, but I think that's what
What is a snowflake in your
I think it's someone, some adults have a perception that young people are quite fragile, which I think is why we're so concerned. You don't have to be fragile to be concerned about a crisis, but we see what's happening, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we have the biggest stake in what's happening. So there definitely needs to be some sort of youth committee and also young people in positions where they can help make decisions and increased engagement among the younger generation.
You're the youngest here, Rebecca. Do you want everyone to listen to you more as you get older? Do you need to shout at them, or do you need to smile or draw nice pictures of them? What do you think? How do you want them to listen to you? 6 months seems a long time for you, doesn't it? Are they listening now? Do you think people listen to you? You've spoken to your school assembly, you produce your booklets, you're on social media?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah?
Becca, what would you say to people to help wildlife and what could they do?
They could stop using plastic, put their rubbish in the bin, and stop cutting trees down and stop building on our green field.
Oh, very good. Sensible advice. What about you then, Alex? Yeah, we'll do that, Alex. What about this idea of a sort of young citizens jury? Would you get involved in something like that? You might at the moment, for example, not be interested in politics, and I get you probably would want to join a political party, but if you were given an opportunity, if a government and the opposition said, listen, we've got a climate crisis, we're going to set up a committee of young people to advise all the political parties in Westminster on what we should be doing, would you be up for that?
Yeah, definitely. It's not a matter of when it's going to form. It's a matter of it's now. It needs to form like right now. If it was going to form any day, it would be before the end of this year, because tomorrow, like Bella says, tomorrow's too late. It almost seems that the government is postponing putting children not in command, but in the right and listening to them and taking action of what they say, because I'm not trying to be polite here, but a lot of times politics and MPs just listen to children and say, oh, you're really inspiring, and then just move on, and next topic is Brexit again. But it's just like, it's like sympathy, and you'd think that after everyone saw that and they gave a standing ovation and everything, you'd think that someone would do something about it, but no, they've all gone off and gone and done the next thing. So it's definitely, we need it. We need to have a young group of people who can actually take command and take notice.
Thank you. There's another question about. Do you want to, please?
So there are an awful lot of things which, and I agree with, in that people are saying we need this now, we need to completely stop cutting down trees, we need to start producing a more eco-friendly lifestyle. I think in that effect it's more reliant on these things. With this, an awful lot of the politicians who are among that generation, as has been said earlier, there's obviously going to be some delay in passing that through because of this, and because of uncertainty on their behalf. And so that's not really going to work in the long, or it's the short run really, it has to happen now. So instead of saying perhaps what politicians need to be doing, what do you think needs to happen for us to be able to persuade politicians so that we don't get another Brexit where it's held over a course of time far longer than it should have been, where it's now distracting us from more important issues?
If you had a chance to tell politicians what they should do,
Well, honestly, we already have the solutions to solve the problem. We don't need high-tech carbon capture, we got flipping trees. So we have the solutions, but there's no political will because there's no profit. Really, if there was if you got money for sorting climate change, then they'd be straight on it, but there isn't. There's the price of saving our future, and of course to the politicians they think, well, we'll be dead by then, so why does that matter?
You've raised a very important point, which adults often don't think about. We can't put a profit on everything in this world. Everything can't be about creating wealth. But to be fair to all of you here as children, you're extremely fortunate. You've been brought up in households with incomes and standards of living that people in many parts of this world could only dream of. And that means you're here healthy and have good clothes and you're clean and you can debate. So you understand how important that world of wealth creation is to provide that. And I would say in defence of us grown-ups, somehow we've got to balance the need to continue to provide that for you, but at the same time to provide a better world for you to live in that's not destroying everything around it. It's not an easy thing to do. And you guys are going to have to try and find some of the solutions, and I don't easily have them. But you want to?
I'm not saying that we should all stop earning money here. I'm saying that politicians and other certain adults, whose I'm not going to mention, their lives are orientated around money, which is half of the reason we're in the mess that we're in, really. So I'm just going to raise that up.
That's a good point. Another question we've got here. James, I'll come to you. Sorry. Who's obviously also, if you don't know James, he's a very well-known wildlife advocate and broadcaster and blogger, and he's been out doing lots of things with us as well. Over to you, James.
Thanks. So obviously this year we've had huge mobilisation in our generation in the form of the climate strikes. But this is happening at a time when youth disconnect from nature has never been greater. Do you think people are striking primarily because of the social impacts? And is there a way that we can engage those strikers in wider environmental issues and wildlife campaigning as well?
Yeah, it's a good one to start with you, Greta. Sorry, Greta. Sorry, that's probably a nice thing as well. You've been sort of pursuing a lot of this stuff before the climate change stuff came along, and to a degree even before Greta came along. How do you see it? Are you a bit worried that some of this is diverting attention away from the wildlife protection issues that you really care about, ivory and wildlife crime and other things? Or is it, can you combine it all? It's a bit like the Extinction Rebellion issue hasn't been very focused on animals and wildlife protection. There is, I think, an event coming up in October where they're trying to bring that back to the fore. But how do you see that debate going?
Biodiversity and climate are so interconnected that I don't really think we can separate the two issues anyway. So in that sense, I think we have to focus on them both at the same time because they're so intrinsically linked. But to answer your question as well, there's a lot of people doubt the sincerity of the climate strikes and think it's more of a social thing. And as Alex said, lots of people do leave school to go to KFC or something like that. But lots of young people are so terrified about what they hear, and they're terrified because of the climate strikes, because it's raising awareness. So that's why there's been a sudden increase. and there's even a phenomenon now called eco-anxiety, where young people are so afraid of the future and the planet we're going to inherit that they become so anxious about it. So that's now a mental health phenomenon as well. So on top of the climate crisis, we now have a mental health crisis generated from that. So I think if anyone's doubting the sincerity of it, I think it's important to remember that this isn't a social thing for young people. This is our future, and there's not really anything more important than the future of our species.
Thank you. I'll come back to you in a moment. Do you need a sense of humour to be doing this type of thing? Because you've got one. That helps, and that helps me at times. Because, is there a danger that when we're talking, you've talked about anxiety, but the anxiety could be crazy because we constantly talk about how bad things and how terrible things are. So sometimes do we need to laugh at ourselves and smile and have humour to get some of our messages across?
100%. I'm not saying we should all be clowns and go around laughing like mad, but I'm saying adding a little bit of humour can lighten the mood, because at the end of the day, the future of our planet is very depressing if we look at it. I mean, an entire garbage truck full of plastic goes in the sea every minute. I mean, every second, 6 sharks die every second. I mean, it's not a very good-looking planet, so I think a sense of humour can help lighten the mood just a little bit.
So do we need more sort of comedian environmentalist
Well, in a way, yes, because as I say, I mean, otherwise we're all just going to be climate people who are just very depressed and anxious and all the rest of it. So I think we do need people with a little bit of a sense of humour, so then we can actually get stuff done and make sure that no one just falls asleep and gets bored. Because the main thing is when things get too depressing and everything, then adults lose interest. And then they can't be bothered with it. So.
Is there anyone that hasn't asked a question? Because I've got 2 people that already have. Can I take one at the back?
Yes, it's not a question. It's just firstly I wanted to thank each of you for taking such great care and putting your efforts into saving the fragile planet, and also that I'm going to the children's climate strike in Lebanon in a few weeks' time. It's a very poor country, probably a lot of kids there wouldn't be at school, and I just feel that I'm sort of carrying your message to join them, and whether there's anything that you would like me to say to your kind of climate friends, your world citizen friends.
We'll come back to the end. I'm going to ask, that's a really good question, to ask what you would tell for the rest of the world about how they feel at the moment. Can I bring my badger up a minute? Can someone just bring Boris up for me now, because I'm safe for Boris. Here comes Boris. It wasn't Boris on Friday for obvious reasons. Right, okay. This animal here, a lot of young people are not familiar with at all. They really probably only see it generally dead by the side of the road. I've seen a few on the way up here this morning. We go into schools and we have taxidermy badgers, and I bring this as well, this big stiff cuddly one for children to love. There was a survey recently, and it was published in the Times and other newspapers, to say that a lot of young people just couldn't even recognise a lot of wildlife living in the countryside towns around them. Foxes come up quite high, but a lot of other species, including badgers to a degree, were quite low. How do we teach children to love animals like this that are living around them, that in some cases adults are all too easy to demonise and to blame for, in this case, diseases of cattle or digging up people's gardens or doing whatever they might do? How do we get children to love an animal like the badger?
No, you care about badgers, please.
Well, it's been, lots of people say you protect what you love and you love what you know, and most children in the city don't know about wildlife because of a lack of wildlife. So I think recently there's been a big campaign to make London a national park city, and I think along with that we need to have, rather than these almost sterile parks which are just stretches of grass, we need to have increased amounts of wildlife in cities and access in all suburbs, no matter your postcode, so everyone needs to have equal access to wildlife. And I think that's all it comes down to. If you see the beauty of nature, then you're naturally going to have a love for it. I think if you're exposed to that when you're younger, and lots of studies have shown that if you're exposed to nature under 12 years old, then when you're older, there's an increased chance that you'll respect and protect it. So I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you. Rebecca, do you love badgers? You my badger? What do you think? Do you think more children should love badgers?
Yeah, I think they do because they look very soft and everyone should love them.
And you don't want to see animals like this. People say that they should be killed or they should be hurt because people are fearful of them because they're quite big and they think they've got sharp claws and things.
I don't think they should be killed because then the ecosystem would just crash down.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much. Part of your wildlife career so far has been built around this animal, isn't it? What attracted you to the badger in the first place? I know your mum's out there.
Yeah.
Is that where it started? Was it just you some beautiful pictures?
Yeah, so it started at the age of 3. So my wonderful mum introduced me to badgers at the age of 3 because she used to carry me down to the badger set because I was very cool, fat baby. It was too far for me to walk, and since then I've just had this massive interest in badgers, and knowing that these guys are being blamed for something that only a small, tiny percentage of them actually do over time, over a massive amount of time, it really annoys me because I know that there's more bovine TB in something like other cows and deers and foxes and domesticated cats, dogs, the list goes on. And it annoys me to know that they're just cherry picking, as it were, that this particular one, this species is being blamed for the death of X amount of cattle because one, the people that killed them may not like them, they may have had a bad experience with them, or they may trust their lawn, which is easily solved if you just leave your lawn about that tall, because then they stay away and just don't do it in stripes. I want to hate stripes, they love stripes. But yeah, it's so easily solved, but it's just cherry picking that they want badgers to go out, and like Rebecca said, that if they take out that, you're going to, sure you'll get an increase in hedgehogs, but that's only a small increase. If you didn't use pesticides, I mean hedgehogs would go up anyway. You would have the decrease of so much, as in like you get, I'm trying to think now, it's like so many, I'm just trying to think of one example, but there's so many different things that it just crash, and it would be a shame to lose them.
Well, actually, it helps to fertilise the soil,
exactly,
the soil, because this goes through a lot of earthworms. So this is constantly digging and redigging the soil, basically, and sucking off earthworms at a huge rate every day. So this is actually quite a good thing to have in the natural environment. It boots everywhere, like every animal. If it boots, all helping to fertilise things. So good things, badgers.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
So I have heard, I was only watching this on YouTube the other day when it was raining, because it's even best to do. I was watching that Americans have studied badgers and said that they are the UK's bears. Which is funny because if you go into schools, there's no mention of badgers, but there's mentions of brown bears, black bears, and you think, if Americans love our badgers so much, and we love theirs, it's just not right. Surely we should love our badgers as our bears, and then they love their bears as bears.
Naturally, this, as big as it is, there are badgers, a big bull badger that could be this size, and they are, our bears. Effectively, we don't have bears or wolves anymore, and our badgers are better looking than American badgers. I love all badgers. Bears look a bit like gargoyles. Ours are actually quite pretty, so just don't tell Americans. I do get that sometimes. You love sharks, don't you? But that's another animal that's really demonised, isn't it? Do you want to tell us why you love sharks so much?
Well, I mean, if we look at a shark, it's just a beautiful and it's an incredibly impressive beast. I mean, yeah, it's got big teeth and all the rest of it, but it's a shark. I mean, to do with the demonisation, thank you Steven Spielberg for creating Jaws. That didn't really help anything. So, I mean, it was that movie, Sharknado, Sharkenstein, Jurassic Shark, all that rubbish. And I haven't made up a single one of those, they are all real movies. That sort of demonised sharks, I mean, and we always get worried that five 5 humans every year get killed by sharks, when in reality, at least 250 million sharks get killed every year. That's 6 every second. I don't know how long this talk is. Someone do the maths and find out how many sharks have died during this talk. I'm going to make an estimate of at least 10,000 at least. It's just mental. And sharks, someone in the Caribbean has been removing their hooks of grey sharks, and now they're like puppies to her. Because they recognise her, and it just shows the playful and kind side of sharks. They're not blind mass murderers. They're kind, constitutive, they think about what they do. They don't go around chomping things for no reason, as movies lead us to believe.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Demonisation in show business and movies. There's a new movie out that I've seen posters for about alligators. I don't know if anyone knows the title of that. But that, again, just worries me because, alligators are another species that are under huge pressure in many parts of the world. And we just make another film that they're going to come up out of the sewers and eat us, which is ridiculous. Manchester Doom?
Yeah,
is that right?
That's what's going to come out next.
I know, probably will. Georgia, can I just ask you, Badgers obviously have been close to your heart, but badgers aside, what do you do to get people just to love wildlife more in this country?
Yeah, definitely. My original passion for wildlife and filming them and filming it and just interest, definitely badgers are a big part of that, and getting involved with campaigning through the Badger Trust. And I think it's definitely down to education, as we've spoken about, like get into schools, into primary schools, and it isn't necessarily about, well, it's nothing to do, you can't teach a child to love nature because they already do. It's about sparking and igniting that passion, which they already do, and it's about showing them why they're amazing and why they should be passionate about them and why they need to protect them, because if they are passionate, they're going to want to fight for them. And it's like, I've looked into, did some short films about bird persecution in Cyprus, and that was again looking at the education side to it, because they were the children in the schools which they were focusing on. The persecution of migratory birds is done in the past. It's there in lots wild scale across Cyprus, and it's very much enrolled into family traditions. So it's like they were going to schools and children were talking about like their grandparents doing it and their parents being involved in everything. But by talking to the children and saying, look at this bird, they were doing drawing competitions and everything and saying how amazing it was, and they were realising that species is much better off alive than for everyone and everything than dead. Yeah, so definitely education is such a massive role and has such importance.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to finish with the last point because we are pushed for time. I'm sorry, I just want to keep it. The point you raised about a message to the world, because the fact that you're going to a country like Lebanon that struggles so much with war and poverty and other things, to take climate issues forward, I think is incredible. So well done. But I do think I'd like to hear what all of the panel would say in terms of the message they have going out of this room to the wider world about the future and why they care so much more can be done. I'll start with you, Ben. What would you say to the world?
I think that's incredible, the extent of how many people are striking, and it's just a testimony to how much young people care. So to the climate strikers you're going to see, I would just say thank you from me, because really it's the only way we're going to move forward is as a movement, and to have a global movement is so powerful. So really thank you to them.
Thank you. Rebecca, what would you say to the world? If you were speaking to the world now, what would you say about your caterpillars and the butterflies that need to protect them?
That they could grow up. Wait.
Sorry? No, we just say, if someone said, you love animals, don't you? You love nature? Would you like all the world to love nature? Do you like everyone?
Yeah.
You would. And if you had a chance to get them all to love it as much as you, would you do that? You'd stand up in front of all of them and tell them like you did in your assembly at school?
Yeah.
That's good. And that's all you need to do. You keep up the good work. You're doing a wonderful job. Let's have a round of applause. You've got a voice, you've got a platform.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be travelling around the world at some point, probably trying to look at the carbon emissions, get the train more than the plane. But when you do speak to more people, and you will, because you're that sort of person, what will you say to them in other countries, for example, now, growing up?
I think that if I was to speak to any other countries, I'd say focus on your own wildlife problems and wildlife crime.
Yeah.
Because this is, I'm not blaming you, Dominic, but what you just said, saying, oh, you'll probably go abroad. I hate that idea. I think that it's a waste of both carbon emissions, fuel, and everything. Why would I need to fly out to somewhere like Africa to go and see a bunch of lions when I've got my own lions here, just off my own doorstep? I think first of all, you need to expand your knowledge about what you have on your doorstep, and then share that with the world. And if you can solve all the problems in each country, then you've done it in a way. In theory, you've done all wildlife crime. If you've solved the ivory trade in your own country, you've solved it. If you've solved the badger, you've solved it. You can keep doing it with each one, and then it's done. And then if it does happen, just put more charges on the people that do it. So my message to the group that you're going to go and visit is that just make sure your voice is heard out there, so then everyone in the world knows that even though it is only a small group of people, it might be a large group of people, I don't know, but either way, they know that in that part of the world, people do care, and that is so important.
Thank you very much. I would fully agree with that, and I do say that a lot, because you're absolutely right. You know, if you can, in some ways, because what Bella was saying about the anxious state of the world and how that's affecting people's mental health, I can understand that. But often I say to people that get so anxious about climate change and deforestation and population increase and the ivory trade and all these things we're familiar with, is you can't solve all of those on your own. But what you might be able to do, you might be able to save some badgers in your local backyard. You might be able to fight for a nature reserve to be protected or created. You might be able to help to open a public footpath and to look after it. And that helps you in your physical and mental health in the place where you live and the people you live with. So local is national, local is global. Because what you said is absolutely right, and I do think that's where the Wildlife Trust and RSPB and events like this and everything that goes on, let's just focus more on our own backyard and what we can do to really sort of make that a better place. Let's have a round of applause for that point. What do you say? Obviously sharks. We have sharks in Britain, but we have a massive global issue with sharks as well. So it's there's a message to the world, isn't there?
Well, there's multiple issues really. I mean, my main problem with the United Kingdom and sharks, as it stands, is legally, if you're Chinese for cultural reasons, you can bring 17.5 kilograms of shark fins into the UK, but you can't bring sausages or cheese. And what they then sell them to certain Chinese restaurants. So there's 19 restaurants in the UK still serving shark fin soup, which really is a complete abuse of animals. Because realistically, they cut off all their fins and throw them back in the sea alive, which is basically like cutting off the arms and legs of a human and putting them back in their house, which is just utter madness. And I mean, the UK is in the top 25 shark fishing countries. I mean, we've seen a 99% decrease in fresher sharks. It's mental. My message would be, no matter how many people tell you sharks are dangerous, always, they're not. They're respectful. And it's like anything. If you respect it, it will respect you. So my message to the world is, respect nature in any shape or form, even if it's a slug, a snail, or a whale, a bit like shark, or a badger.
Thank you so much.
No, definitely, as we've all said, it's just incredible to see all across the world. So, like with the uprising, with the school strikes and the climate strikes, how many young people are getting involved. And I think it's just so important for them to realise that what they're saying is being listened to, and it is incredibly important, even if they only think they've got a small audience, if it's just like they're saying a tweet or it's just them and a few friends doing something. There's always someone that's probably going to be listening, there's always someone that's going to be impacted or inspired by what they're saying, and it's always, so they should always remember that and just keep sort of fighting, keep going no matter sort of how small they may feel. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Charlie, you want a final point? You want to stand up so you are?
No, not really. I'm Charlie. It was just a very quick point. I've worked on projects in places like Kenya and Japan and Korea, and they really can't believe that anybody in the UK could care. And I was going out and telling them, and this was pre-phones and cameras, I just wondered if whoever was talking about going out to the Lebanon had a camera phone, perhaps we could just now say hi, hello from the UK, and just record it on the camera and take it out there. I thought that might be a useful thing for them to prove to the kids out.
We can do that at the end. That'd be really good. Thank you. Yeah, we've definitely got time to do that. Thank you. I'm going to bring this to a close. I know we could go on for much longer. I was in Downing Street on Wednesday because I was with Carrie Simmons just going over her speech, and she said to me, I'm really nervous about speaking at this event. But she said, if I'm nervous, what do the young people feel like when they have to stand in front of audiences? Which is why in the speech she included recognition of every young person and spoke about them in the speech, and I'm glad that a lot of the media picked up on that as well. So I think she was right. I think we're all right. You know, as adults, it's nerve-wracking to speak, but as young people, we need to hear from you, and it's all the more nerve-wracking for you. But if you don't do this, and look at this wonderful panel, for Bella, you're incredible. You know, Rebecca, absolutely amazing. You know, Alex, an author now. You know, Finlay, oh blimey, you're going to be great. You know, you're a comedian already, and I love you every moment. And Georgia, you're doing such great work and keeping with it as you go through university. What an amazing panel. Aren't we so lucky in this country to have such people that will come and give their time? And also, can I just say thank you to some of the parents who are out there, because they know they're putting a lot of time and effort in supporting. So let's have a round of applause. We'll be back next year here, and we'll have more people and more voices, and let's just keep fighting. So it's so important. So thank you so much, all of you. Thank you.